He smiled at every argument, every objection, until the judge cleared his throat and read one clause aloud. The smile faded, because that clause changed everything. For 2 agonizing years, I built my case. My name is Adrian Vance, and I watched my life's work, my reputation, my very sanity be dismantled by the man I once called my partner, my husband, Elias Thorne. This trial was my last stand. A brutal corporate divorce where the prize wasn't just our billion-dollar tech empire, Vance Thorne Dynamics, but the truth. He'd bled the company dry with secret deals, hidden debts in offshore shadows, and left me holding the bag while he played the visionary in the press. My lawyers were the best money could buy. His strategy was arrogance, a smirk plastered on his face as they presented forged documents, paid-off witnesses. He smiled through every damning piece of evidence I presented, as if he knew a secret I didn't. That smile told the world I was hysterical, vindictive. It broke me day after day, but I held on. I had one thing he didn't, the original signed operating agreement. And buried in its pages in plain sight was Article 12, Section C. The good faith guillotine. A clause so simple, so devastating, his billion-dollar smirk never saw it coming. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and comment where you are watching from. The polished mahogany of the defense table felt like the only solid thing in the universe. Adrian Vance kept her hands folded atop it, fingertips pressed into her own knuckles hard enough to leave pale moons. The pressure was a tether, holding her in the present, in this cavernous, echoing room where her future was being dissected. Across the aisle, past the gulf of worn carpet and irreparable history, Elias Thorne lounged. He was listening to his lead counsel, a silver-haired shark named Mandel, whisper something, a faint, amused curve on his lips. That smile. It hadn't left him for 2 days of trial. Adrian had cataloged its variations, the smug twist when her forensic accountant was being cross-examined, the pitying, almost sorrowful downturn when her own lawyers described the emotional toll, the confident, open grin he'd flashed at the jury during a recess. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, and it was working. Every hum of the fluorescent lights, every scratch of a court reporter's pen, every rustle of a juror's shirt seemed amplified. Adrian's own lawyer, Sonia Richter, was a steady, calm presence beside her, a wall of crisp navy wool and collected fury. But even Sonia couldn't block out the aura of Elias' composure. It screamed his innocence to the room. It said, "Look at her, tense and brittle. Look at me, I have nothing to hide." The bailiff's call of "all rise" snapped the room to attention. Judge Harwood, a man with the weary eyes of a historian who'd seen every version of human greed, ascended the bench. As they sat, Adrian's mind, against her will, didn't go to the financials or the legal precedents. It went to the garage. The smell of cold concrete, solder, and ambition. Her hands typing code until they cramped, Elias' laughter as he sold a vision over a crackling phone line to their first investor, Vance Thorne Dynamics. They painted the sign themselves. He'd kissed her, his lips tasting of cheap coffee and wild hope, and said, "Partners in everything." The gavel cracked. The court will hear the cross-examination of Mr. Alistair Finch. Finch, her whistleblower, a former financial controller for Elias, looked like a man who hadn't slept in a year. Mandel rose, not with aggression, but with the gentle patience of a disappointed teacher. "Mr. Finch," Mandel began, his voice a smooth baritone, "you've testified that you felt uneasy about the Cayman Islands holding company, Meridian Holdings LLC, correct?" "It wasn't just unease," Finch said, his voice reedy. "The transfers were irregular. Invoices were fabricated for services never rendered. It was a conduit." "A conduit," Mandel repeated, letting the word hang. He picked up a document. "This is your annual performance review from 18 months ago, signed by Mr. Thorne. It notes, and I quote, Alistair is a valued team member, but his reluctance to adapt to innovative global financial strategies requires mentorship." He paused, looking at the jury. "You were struggling with the new, complex international structure, weren't you?" "I wasn't struggling. I was questioning it." "And after these questions, you were passed over for a promotion to Vice President of Finance, a role that carried a significant equity bonus. You were angry, were you not?" Finch's cheeks flushed. "I was concerned for the company." "Of course you were," Mandel said, the words dripping with faux understanding. He didn't accuse, he simply laid out the timeline. Finch's missed promotion, his sudden ethical concerns, his secret meetings with Adrian's legal team, followed by a severance package negotiation that was, coincidentally, 3 times the standard. Mandel painted a picture not of a hero, but of a disgruntled, confused employee, bought and paid for. With every point, Elia's smile would soften into something resembling regret for a loyal employee who'd lost his way. Adrian felt the jury's doubt like a physical chill. The damning digital paper trail Finch had provided was being reframed as the misunderstood work of a brilliant, forward-thinking CEO, mismanaged by a subordinate who couldn't keep up. The day wore on, a slow bleed. Sonia fought back hard, her questioning sharp and precise, re-anchoring the facts. But the facts were getting lost in the story Elias was selling, and his face was the perfect cover. During a recess, Adrian stood in the stark, tiled bathroom, splashing cold water on her wrists. She stared at her reflection, the dark circles under her eyes, the tight line of her mouth. She looked like the portrait of a vengeful partner he was constructing. She felt vengeful, but it was a secondary burn. The primary wound was betrayal, a deep, fundamental fracture in the story of her life. The worst was yet to come. After lunch, Elias took the stand. He was sworn in, his hand on the Bible, his gaze steady and sincere. His own lawyer led him through a curated history, the scrappy startup, the all-nighters, his vision for a tech ecosystem. He spoke of Adrian with a practiced, aching reverence. Her mind, it was lightning, still is. We built the core architecture together. I handled the business horizon, she optimized the engine. He made it sound like a beautiful, natural division of labor, not the gradual, systematic exclusion she had experienced. Then came the pivot. When did you realize the partnership was under strain, Mr. Thorne? Elias let a moment of poignant silence hang. When the scale changed, we needed rapid, decisive capital moves to seize market opportunities. Venture debt, strategic offshoring. Adrian is a perfectionist. She wanted to understand every nut, every bolt of every deal. In our early days, that was our strength. At our velocity, it became an anchor. He didn't say it angrily. He said it sadly, as if mourning a beautiful thing that was no longer practical. He was reframing her vigilance, her meticulousness, the very qualities that had saved them a dozen times early on, as a liability. And the allegations of fraud, his counsel asked, as if presenting a distasteful but necessary topic. Elias turned to the jury. His smile was gone, replaced by earnest bafflement. It's fiction, a painful fiction. The shell companies were legitimate tax-efficient vehicles used by every Fortune 500. The hidden debts were convertible notes, standard instruments. My team provided all the documentation. Adrian. He looked directly at her then, and his eyes were the worst part, filled with a wounded, loving confusion. Adrian got lost in the complexity. She saw monsters in the machinery. I think when our personal life fell apart, she needed a reason, a villain. And she decided it was me and my work. The objection died on Sonia's lips. It was masterful. He'd weaponized their shared past, their intimacy, and turned her evidence into the symptom of a broken heart. Adrian kept her face a marble mask, but inside she was crumbling. The smirk had returned as he stepped down, just a ghost of it at the corner of his mouth as he passed her table. It said, "See, I told you couldn't win." That night in the sterile glow of the law firm's war room, defeat was a thick fog. Boxes of documents were stacked like headstones. Sonia was strategizing about the next witness, her voice tight. We need to get the jury back to the cold, hard numbers. Forget the narrative. It's a spreadsheet, not a soap opera. Adrian nodded numbly. When Sonia left to get coffee, Adrian was alone with the ghosts of her endeavor. The fight was leaching out of her, replaced by a hollow grief. Not for the company, not yet, but for the man in the garage. Had he ever existed, or was he just the earliest prototype of the smiling specter in the courtroom? She reached listlessly for a banker's box labeled foundational. It held the relics, the first business plan, scribbled on a napkin, the incorporation papers, the original operating agreement. She pulled out the agreement, its pages crisp but aging. She'd read it 100 times during discovery, but always as a legal document, searching for loopholes he might use. Tonight, she read it as a eulogy. It was simple, clear, drafted by their friend Ben, who'd done it for a case of beer and belief. The language was unadorned, speaking of best efforts, fair dealing, and mutual success. Her eyes skimmed the standard clauses about capital accounts and profit sharing. Then she reached Article 12, dissolution and fiduciary duty. She'd always stopped at the sections about buyout procedures and valuation methods. But her gaze drifted down to Section C, a paragraph she'd mentally categorized as boilerplate morality. The words seemed to lift off the page, sharpening into terrible, beautiful clarity. Utmost good faith fiduciary duty material and demonstrable breach shall render null and void any transaction immediate forfeiture of the breaching member's entire equity stake transferred to the aggrieved member without compensation. Her breath hitched. She read it again, and again. It wasn't just about duty, it was a covenant with a nuclear penalty. A clause for a partnership built on a handshake, designed to annihilate anyone who betrayed its core. Ben, idealistic Ben, had built a guillotine for traitors and hidden it in plain sight. Her heart began to pound, a slow, deep drumbeat of resurgent hope. This changed the battlefield entirely. It wasn't about dividing the spoils of a ruined kingdom. It was about proving a betrayal of its founding oath and claiming the entire crown. Sonia returned, 2 coffees in hand. "We'll start with the debt restructuring documents tomorrow. Try to show the personal guar." "Sonia," Adrian interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. She turned the document around and pointed a finger unwavering at the clause. "Forget the spreadsheet. We're not fighting over assets anymore." She looked up, the exhaustion burned away by a cold, clear flame. "We're going to prove he broke his vow. And then," she said, the ghost of Elia's own smirk touching her lips for the first time, "we're going to take everything." The morning light that filtered through the high courtroom windows felt different. It wasn't the harsh, exposing glare of the previous days. It held a new, sharp-edged clarity. Adrian sat, her posture unchanged, but the static dread in her veins had been replaced by a humming current of focus. She had slept, finally, not because hope had returned, but because a path, narrow, treacherous, but undeniable, had revealed itself. She watched Sonia Richter place a single, pristine copy of the original operating agreement on their table, next to the mountains of subsequent amendments and financial filings. It looked almost quaint, a relic among weapons. Elias was already in place, his smile refreshed, his confidence seemingly replenished by a good night's sleep in a luxury hotel. He caught Adrian's eye and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, the kind you might give a worthy but ultimately defeated opponent. Adrian held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then looked away, a subtle shift that made his smile tighten just a fraction. Sonia called their forensic accountant, David Chen, back to the stand. Mandel looked faintly bored, ready to pick apart more technicalities. "Mr. Chen," Sonia began, her voice carrying a new, deliberate weight. "Yesterday, you outlined a series of complex financial transactions. Today, I want to simplify. Taking them as a whole, what was their primary effect on Vance Thorn dynamics?" Chen adjusted his glasses. "They systematically stripped liquid assets and future revenue streams from the core company, Vance Thorn Dynamics LLC, and funneled them into entities controlled solely by Mr. Thorn, while simultaneously loading the LLC with debt. And for the LLC, the company owned by both my client and Mr. Thorn, what was the outcome of these actions? Severe financial impairment, a crippling debt burden, a significant reduction in its valuation, potentially to 0 or below." Sonia nodded. She picked up a flowchart her team had prepared. "So, if Mr. Thorn, as a managing member, was making decisions that enriched himself personally, but drove the company he co-owned into the ground, what would you call that?" Mandel was on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor, calls for a legal conclusion." "Sustained," Judge Harwood intoned. Sonia didn't miss a beat. "Let me rephrase. In your professional opinion, do those actions align with the duty of a business partner to act for the mutual benefit of the partnership?" "They do not," Chen said firmly. "Would you characterize them as actions taken in good faith toward his business partner, Adrian Vance?" Mandel objected again. "Vague and ambiguous." But the seed was planted. Sonia was no longer just presenting fraud. She was framing it as a breach of a fundamental partnership principle. She walked Chen through each major transaction again, but this time, after each one, she asked a simple, damning question. Was this in the mutual interest of the LLC? The answer was always no. Ilya's smile had become fixed, a prop he'd forgotten how to put down. He scribbled a note to Mandel, who frowned. The strategy was clear to them now, but it seemed like moral grandstanding, a weak plea to the jury's emotions. Mandel's cross-examination was brief, reasserting the complexity and strategic necessity of the moves, trying to drag the discussion back into the fog of high finance where he held the advantage. For the next 2 hours, Sonia built her new fortress, brick by brick. She called a corporate governance expert to testify on the foundational importance of the fiduciary duty of good faith in closely held companies like LLCs. She entered into evidence emails where Adrian had explicitly questioned the Meridian transfers, and Elias had dismissed her concerns as myopic. The narrative was tightening, constricting around a single, powerful idea: betrayal of a core vow. Finally, Sonia approached the bench. Your Honor, the plaintiff submits the original operating agreement of Vance Thorn Dynamics LLC, dated June 11, 2010, for admission into evidence. Mandel sighed audibly, a performance of weary annoyance. Objection, Your Honor. This document is a museum piece. It has been amended, supplanted, and rendered entirely irrelevant by 17 subsequent financing agreements, stock issuance protocols, and board governance structures. Its admission is a waste of the court's time. Sonia was ready. Your Honor, we are not submitting it to govern current equity distribution. We are submitting it as the foundational covenant, the originating document that establishes the fiduciary relationship and the standard of utmost good faith between the members. The subsequent documents deal with how the company runs. This document defines what the company is at its heart: a partnership. We need to establish the defendant's understanding and acceptance of that bedrock principle at the inception. Judge Harwood's eyes, heavy-lidded and perceptive, moved between the lawyers. He had watched Elia's calm performance, had noted the smirk. He'd also heard the cold, hard facts of financial diversion. I'll allow it, he said, his voice gravelly. The jury may consider it for the purpose of establishing the nature of the members' initial relationship and duties. Overruled. The agreement was entered as Exhibit P-114. Sonia carried a copy to the witness stand, where her governance expert confirmed its authenticity and standard nature for a 2-member startup LLC. She then brought it to Chen. Mr. Chen, based on your analysis, did Mr. Thorne's actions, as you've described them, violate the standard of utmost good faith, as one would ordinarily understand it in such a partnership agreement? Objection, Mandel barked. Sustained, the judge said, but the phrase utmost good faith now hung in the air, repeated solemn. Sonia returned to her table. She took a breath, centering herself. This was the moment. She picked up her own copy of the agreement, turned to a tabbed page, and walked to the center of the courtroom, directly facing the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said, her voice dropping into a confidential, compelling register. We've heard a lot about complex deals and high finance, but this case, at its core, is simple. It's about a promise 2 people made when they had nothing but an idea and this document. She held it up. A promise to act in utmost good faith with each other. She let that sit. The room was utterly still. Elias had stopped writing. He was watching her, his body rigid. The defendant has admitted the actions, but claims they were just business. But what kind of business requires you to destroy your partner's share? She turned and walked toward the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to read a specific provision of this founding promise, so that its intent is unmistakably clear for the record. Proceed, Judge Harwood said. Sonia found her place. Article 12, Section C, she read it aloud, her voice clear, measured, and devoid of theatricality, which made the words more deadly. Each clause landed like a stone in a pond. Shall render null and void any transaction arising from said breach, and trigger immediate forfeiture of the breaching member's entire equity stake, transferred to the aggrieved member without compensation. A A ripple went through the courtroom. A juror's eyes widened. A reporter stopped chewing gum. Sonia looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, for absolute clarity, and to ensure the court appreciates the precise contractual language at issue, I would ask that the court itself read this penalty clause into the record." Mandel shot up. "Objection, this is blatant theatrics. The court has heard the clause." "The court has," Judge Harwood agreed, his eyes on Sonia. He seemed to weigh her request. He understood what she was doing, forcing a ritual, making the law itself speak the consequence. He reached out his hand. "Let me see it." Sonia delivered the document to the bench. The judge pulled his reading glasses from his robe, settled them on his nose. The silence was so profound Adrian could hear the rustle of the paper. He cleared his throat, a dry, judicial sound. He began to read. His voice was not Sonia's calibrated instrument. It was older, weary, imbued with the full authority of the bench. It turned the clause from an argument into a verdict. "Notwithstanding any other provision, herein, a material and demonstrable breach of this good faith shall render null and void any transaction." As he read, Adrian watched Elias. The color drained from his face, starting from his forehead and receding like a tide, leaving a waxy pallor. His lips, so often curved, parted slightly. His eyes, fixed on the judge, darted to Mandel, who was frantically flipping through a binder, his own face a mask of dawning, horrified comprehension. The clause was not superseded. It was standalone, a landmine left in the original field. And trigger immediate forfeiture of the breaching members' entire equity stake. Elias' hand, resting on the table, began to tremble. He clenched it into a fist to stop it. The smirk was gone, utterly erased, replaced by a blank, slack shock. He looked like a man who had been building a castle on what he thought was solid ground, only to have the judge read aloud the survey that proved it was quicksand. Said stake to be transferred to the aggrieved member without compensation. The judge finished. He removed his glasses, the click of the stems deafening. He looked from the document to Elias, his expression unreadable. In the echoing silence, Sonia spoke, her voice now ringing with finality. "Your Honor, based on the uncontroverted evidence of breach and the clear, unambiguous penalty provided for in the foundational contract, the plaintiff moves for summary judgment on the issue of equity forfeiture. The defendant's entire stake in Vance Thorn Dynamics LLC must be transferred to Adrian Vance." The gavel cracked, not for a decision, but to shatter the stunned silence. "Court will recess for 1 hour to consider this motion." As they rose, chaos erupted at the defense table. Elias was leaning into Mandel, his composure shattered, whispering fiercely, desperately. Mandel was shaking his head, pointing at the agreement, his earlier arrogance replaced by a frantic, beleaguered defense. The smile was gone. In its place was the raw, terrified face of a man who had just heard the trapdoor swing open beneath his feet. Adrian stood, gathered her notepad, and walked out, not looking back. The air behind her was thick with the sound of a crumbling empire. The air in the corridor outside the courtroom was thick with the buzz of a detonated bomb. Reporters strained against the velvet rope, their voices a cacophony of questions that Adrian ignored, guided by Sonia's firm hand on her elbow toward a small, private witness room. She closed the door on the noise, and the sudden silence was almost as loud. The taste was not of victory, but of ozone, the sharp, clean scent after a lightning strike. Her hands were steady. She expected to feel a surge of triumph, the heat of vindication, but there was only a profound, vibrating hollowness. She had aimed to wound the giant, and instead, she had found the lever to topple him entirely. Sonia leaned against the wall, letting out a long, controlled breath. "He didn't know," she said, almost to herself. "His lawyers, they were so focused on the later financing rounds, the corporate veil, they never looked back at the original covenant. It was beneath them." She looked at Adrian, a new respect in her eyes. "You found the guillotine blade in the attic." "Ben put it there," Adrian said softly, the memory of their optimistic, doomed friend a pang of sadness amidst the ruin. "He said partners should have a self-destruct button for bad faith. We laughed. We thought it was poetic." An hour later, they re-entered a courtroom humming with a different energy. The spectators leaned forward in their seats. The jury, now bystanders to a legal procedure they no longer controlled, watched with rapt attention. Elias was already seated. The transformation was chilling. He sat perfectly still, his spine rigid, but all the casual grace was gone. He stared at the grain of the wood before him, his face a bloodless mask. The smirk had been wiped away, leaving behind the cold, clean lines of a marble effigy. His lawyer, Mandel, looked exhausted and furious, surrounded by a tumble of hastily printed case law. Judge Harwood took the bench, his demeanor even more solemn than before. He dispensed with preamble. The court has considered the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment on the specific issue of contractual forfeiture as outlined in Article 12, Section C of the original operating agreement. The defendant's argument that subsequent agreements supersede this clause is unpersuasive, as none of those documents explicitly nullify or amend the foundational fiduciary duty or its attached penalty. The clause is clear, unambiguous, and severe, as such contracts between sophisticated parties are permitted to be. He paused, his gaze settling on Elias, who did not look up. The evidence of material and demonstrable breach of the duty of utmost good faith is, in this court's view, overwhelming and uncontroverted. Therefore, the motion is granted. A gasp quickly stifled from the gallery. The judge continued, methodically dismantling a life's work with each sentence. The transactions detailed in Exhibits P22 through P107, related to the Meridian Holdings structure and the associated debt instruments, are hereby declared null and void. They are unwound. Furthermore, pursuant to the contract, the equity stake of the defendant, Elias Thorne, in Vance Thorne Dynamics LLC, representing 50% of all issued membership interests, is forfeited in its entirety. Legal title to that stake is hereby ordered transferred to the plaintiff, Adrian Vance, effective immediately. He wasn't finished. The financial coup de grace was yet to fall. The court recognizes that the LLC now holds significant debt obligations incurred under the now voided transactions. However, given the finding of breach and bad faith, and the personal benefit derived by Mr. Thorne, those specific debts are attributable to him. The company, under its sole remaining member, may pursue restitution from Mr. Thorne, personally, for any liabilities it is forced to satisfy related to these voided deals. Adrian watched as the words personally liable struck Elias like physical blows. A faint tremor started in his shoulders. He was no longer a CEO protecting assets in a corporate shell. He was a man, stripped bare, facing the abyss of personal bankruptcy. He had arrived this morning as a titan. He would leave as a debtor. The gavel fell. It was over. The storm of sound broke. Mandel was immediately on his feet, voicing an appeal, statting grounds, but his words were lost in the tide. Elias finally moved. He turned his head slowly, not towards Adrian, but towards the crowd of reporters, their cameras now flashing like lightning, capturing his downfall. The blank shock in his eyes curdled into something darker, a raw, unvarnished hatred before it was quickly shuttered behind a veil of stunned dignity. He stood, allowed Mandel to shepherd him through a side exit, a fallen king escaping the jeers of the mob. Adrian did not follow him with her eyes. She signed some papers Sonia placed before her, her movements automatic. She walked out through the main doors, past the shouted questions. MS, Vance, how do you feel? Will you sue him personally? Is the company salvageable? Her silence more eloquent than any statement. The victory lap was a quiet drive to an empty office tower. Her keycard still worked. The lobby echoed with her footsteps. The Vance Thorne Dynamics logo on the wall, the elegant intertwining of the V and T, now looked like a monument to a severed knot. She went not to the executive suite, but to her old engineering office, a smaller space she'd kept even as the company grew. The ghost of their early collaboration lingered here. Whiteboards filled with faded architectural sketches, a worn couch where they'd crash after all-nighters. 2 days later, the request came, not through legal channels but via a terse, one-line email from an unknown associate. Elias Thorne requests a private meeting. Neutral location. No counsel. Sonia advised against it. You have nothing to gain. Let him stew in the mess he made. Adrian knew she was right, and yet, The man in the garage deserved a burial. The specter in the courtroom needed to be laid to rest. She agreed. They met in a bland conference room at a business hotel. He arrived alone, dressed in a simple button-down shirt, no tie. The power suits were gone, perhaps already reclaimed by creditors. He looked older, diminished, the cunning light in his eyes replaced by a hollow fatigue. The smell of his cologne, once so familiar, now seemed like the scent of a stranger. He didn't sit. Adrian. Elias. You destroyed me. The words were flat, not an accusation, but a statement of fact. You were driving the company off a cliff. I just refused to be in the passenger seat. A muscle twitched in his jaw. The ghost of his old arrogance flickered. That clause, it was a relic, a joke. It was a promise, she said, her voice quiet. The only one that mattered. He finally sank into a chair, the fight leaving him. They're coming for everything. The banks. The investors in the shell deals. The forfeiture, it leaves me exposed. Personally. He looked at her, and for a second she saw the young man from the garage, terrified of failure. I could go to jail if I can't make restitution. Adrian felt no pity, but she also felt no desire for his blood. She wanted something more valuable. What do you want from me, Elias? I'm not giving back the company, and I'm not funding your escape. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. A settlement, a personal one, from you to me, enough to cover the worst of it, to keep me out of court. You'll own a debt-free company once the voided deals are unwound. You can afford it. She almost laughed. The audacity was breathtakingly unchanged. He still saw her as a resource, a solution to his problems. She let the silence stretch, watching hope and desperation war in his eyes. No, she said finally, but I will offer you a trade. He looked wary. What trade? The truth, she said. I will not pursue you for a single dime of the personal liability if you sign a full, detailed, and public confession. Everything. The shell companies, the fabricated invoices, the intent to defraud me and the company. You will file it with the SEC. You will release it to the press. You will put your name on it. His face contorted in horror. You want me to destroy my name? Completely. Your name is already a byword for betrayal in this court, she said, her voice ice. This isn't about destroying you. It's about restoring the truth. My name, the company's name. You took our shared story and twisted it into a lie about a hysterical woman. I want the record set straight. You give me the truth, and I give you a chance, however small, to rebuild from zero instead of from a prison cell. He stared at her, understanding dawning. She wasn't offering mercy, she was offering a choice between two kinds of ruin. One was financial and absolute. The other was reputational, but with a sliver of a future. He was a man who valued his own legend above all else. It was the crueler cut. His shoulders slumped. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Have your lawyer draw it up. He signed the confession a week later in a lawyer's office, without meeting her again. Adrian read it when it was filed. It was clinical, devastating, and complete. The story of the smiling, confident CEO was replaced by the ledger of a thief. The first day back at the company as its sole owner, she called an all-hands meeting in the main engineering bay. The staff, a skeleton crew of the loyal, the curious, and the stranded, looked at her with a mixture of fear and hope. She stood before them, no podium, no smile. Many of you have seen the news, she began, her voice carrying easily in the quiet space. The short version is true. The company was being bled dry. It's over. The long version is in the SEC filings. She took a breath. The debt created by those actions is being contested. It will be a messy process. The road ahead is not about explosive growth. It's about integrity. It's about rebuilding this. She gestured to the space, to the servers humming in the next room, on the only foundation that ever really mattered: good faith. She didn't promise bonuses or glory. She promised hard, transparent work. She announced she was dissolving the holding company structures, reverting to the original, simple LLC. She would be CEO, CFO, and lead architect, for now. When she finished, there was no applause. There were a few nods, some thoughtful looks. It was enough. Later, alone in the stripped-bare CEO's office, her office, she allowed herself one moment. She opened a desk drawer and took out the old, framed photo from the garage. Two young people, covered in grease and hope, grinning at a future they believed was theirs together. She looked at Elia's youthful, unscarred face, at her own bright eyes. Then she turned the frame face down and placed it back in the drawer. She walked to the window. The city sprawled below, a circuit board of infinite complexity. The smirk was gone, dissolved in the acid of truth. The trial was over. The real work, the slow, deliberate, and solitary work of rebuilding something real, had just begun. She turned her back on the view and sat at the clean desk, opening the first of 1,000 files.